Negro.
Saveur. Flavor.
Aroma.
Arôme. Black.
¿Cuánto?
Crème. Brown. Sucre.
Vital.
Noir.
Fuerte.
Lait. Strong.
Sabor.
Cream. Combien? How much? Café.
Under an equatorial sun, Colombia opens up on the Pacific and Caribbean seas. It is here on the slopes of these mountains that the most famous coffee in the world is grown. Only 5% of the land in Colombia is cultivated, and of this, only a quarter is given over to coffee. Colombia ranks as the second coffee producer in the world. Chinchina, at the heart of the Andes Cordillera, is one of the richest agricultural centers in Colombia. While abroad, Colombian coffee is known for its aroma. Here it is important for a different reason. 3 million people depend on its production for their livelihood.
Encarnación, pásame el tintico.
Lucerito, andate donde doña Josefina, llévale el atadito pues.
In this district of Chinchina, most of the workers are jornaleros, who harvest coffee 4 months per year. The rest of the time, they do their best to find other work.
Con esta reuma.
Tiberio, deja pues de molestar esas gallinas.
Algemiro, préndase la radio, hermano.
The people of this neighborhood are farmers who've come looking for work in the city. But the city holds no job opportunities for them, and so most continue to work in the field. "5 a.m. in the house of Marlena and Tiberio Tangarife. It's time to get up and go to work.
¿Por qué no te levantas ya?
¿Qué horas son?
Levántese ya, ya es hora.
Marlena and Tiberio's lives are much like those of thousands of other Latin American peasants.
No estaba cogiendo el día.
This is their story and the story of Colombian coffee.
Cuando yo nací,
My mother was widowed shortly after I was born. She had to work very hard to raise her 8 children.
Luego cuando crecí, pues
I left the house when I was 15.
me casé. Y ahorita ya tengo 2 niños.
Now I've got 2 children.
El uno tiene 5 años, yo tenía 17 cuando
The
nació.
oldest is 5, and I was 17 when she was
La otra
born.
niña que tengo tiene 3 años
My other
ahora.
daughter is
Cuando nació la
3,
niña, yo
and when she
tenía
was born,
18.
I was 19.
Y ahorita ya tengo
Now
22.
I'm 22 years old, and since I was a child, I've had to work the land.
New York, 5:30 a.m. On the average, throughout the world, almost 2 pounds of coffee per capita are produced yearly. And while most coffee is produced in Latin America, it is also where consumption is lowest, on the average 7 pounds per capita per year. In North America, it is 11 pounds, 14 pounds in Central Europe, while Scandinavian countries at 27 pounds rank as the greatest consumers. In Asia, coffee is not yet competing with tea, though Tokyo now has more than 16,000 coffee houses. Chinchina, 6 a.m. The main square is already quite busy. It is a crossroads, a meeting place where Marlena and Tiberio regularly go in order to find work. It is here that truckers, the spokesmen for the plantation owners, call out the number of hands needed for the day. Day laborers able to pay their transportation to the plantation travel morning and evening by truck or jeep, which allows them to save their strength for the job of picking coffee. But transportation is expensive, and Marlena and Tiberio, like most of the workers, have no other choice but to walk a half, 3/4, or sometimes an hour each way. 8:30 a.m. We could be in Montreal, New York, Cologne, or Stockholm. Swedes, Dutch, Jamaicans, South Americans, Italians and other Europeans, as well as Africans and North Americans, in short, most people can't start the day without a cup of coffee. Le café est la boisson la plus populaire au monde. El café es la bebida más popular del mundo. Coffee is the most popular drink in the world. The coffee shrub grows in very moist soil at an altitude of approximately 1,500 meters, shaded from the equatorial sun by banana leaves, for instance. It takes 5 years for the coffee shrub to produce its fruit, which is known as cherries, and after 15 years, it ceases to be productive. In order to ensure continuous production, it is necessary to plant seeds every year. And to improve the quality and the yield of a coffee shrub, Colombia and Brazil, the main producers, have pooled their research services. They have created a new variety of coffee shrub, the Caturo coffee, which is especially resistant to rust, a ravaging disease which prevents a shrub from bearing fruit. The commercial history of coffee dates back to 900 BC, when the Arabs first began to export it. In fact, coffee did not originate in Arabia, but rather in Abyssinia, known today as Ethiopia. However, most of the tales and legends surrounding coffee are of Arabian origin.
El café.
Jose Chalarca, a Colombian historian, tells us the most famous of these legends about a shepherd by the name of Caldi.
There
once was a shepherd who had a flock of goats. One afternoon, he found them quite agitated. He was surprised to see that they jumped about so erratically, and so he tried to find the cause. He found that his goats were behaving in this manner after having eaten small red cherries from a shrub. The shepherd took a few branches with the red cherries to a monk in a nearby monastery. The monk tried to make an infusion from the branches and ripe cherries, but the resulting potion was undrinkable. So he threw the beverage, branches and cherries, into the fire. When the cherries began to roast, a most pleasant aroma rose from them.
Picking is done by hand. bean by bean. By 9 a.m., Tiberio and Marlena have already been working for 3 hours, standing under an increasingly hot sun. In Brazil, the world's leading producer of coffee, machines are used to harvest the grains, those that are ripe as well as those that aren't. But Colombian coffee is not handled like an industrial product. Only the ripe beans are picked, while the others are left on the shrubs. Besides, an overly mechanized harvesting system would result in unemployment for thousands of coffee pickers. Also, hand-picking suits the 300,000 producers who find it more profitable to hire manpower, which is both plentiful and cheap. Marlene and Tiberio work 12 hours a day. They are paid 3 cents for each pound of coffee they pick, and as they can harvest as many as 240 pounds of cherries, they earn a maximum of $7 a day.
I know what you're saying. I paid at $4.50, $4.70, and $4.90. $4.50, $4.70, $4.80, and $4.90. It was a higher bid, but you ordered and you were selling there. And then you offered it 70. Yes, 50, 70, 80, 90.
New York, 9:30 a.m. The brokers are already at work. There is a coffee, sugar, and cocoa exchange located in New York. Transactions here deal with coffee, which will be delivered 3 to 6 months down the road. Coffee is not a raw material, and it is therefore surprising to realize that its market value is so high, second in fact only to oil. Mild coffees, Colombian coffees in particular, are rated highest. Rumors circulate quickly on the stock market. News of a natural catastrophe which could prevent the production of coffee in an area of Colombia or Brazil immediately affects the value of coffee, and speculators wheel and deal. The game is all the more frantic in that trading is limited to 20 minutes.
Garçon, s'il vous plaît. Monsieur, c'est combien? $2, s'il vous plaît. Merci beaucoup. Bonne journée.
Most plantations are equipped to wash the coffee. Prior to this, however, the fresh cherries have been hulled, with the 2 coffee beans removed from their red outer shells. Following a period of fermentation, the coffee undergoes a water wash. This washing will have an effect on the quality, which is to say, the taste and the price of the coffee. Then, the coffee is spread out for even drying. It is at this stage that the beans begin to be classified according to their size. Already, those suitable for exportation are being identified. The drying process can take several days, for the sun is constantly interrupted by rain. Sliding roofs protect the beans from the rain. And when the volume of coffee becomes sufficient, the beans are oven dried for speed. This coffee is called pergamino, and 4 pounds of cherries are needed to make a pound of it. It is at this point that the coffee is transferred to jute bags and begins its journey. Trucks carry the dried coffee from the plantation to the sorting center. All coffee produced for exportation must go through the Federación Nacional de Cafeteros de Colombia. This government agency regulates production, distribution, the sale, pricing, and quality of the coffee. There are dozens of centers, such as this one, throughout Colombia.
Siga trayendo.
When the coffee first arrives at the Federation, it is weighed.
265, 6.
Then, it is submitted to a stringent quality control inspection. Samples are checked for cleanliness, size, and the taste of the bean. It is in chewing the dried coffee bean that one can tell if they have been properly washed. The producer pays for transportation. And if the load of coffee does not meet standards of quality established by the Federation, the producer must assume all transportation costs. The Federation serves small and large producers, and to each, it pays the same price, set and guaranteed by the state, 70 cents per pound of dried coffee. While the sale and purchase of coffee within the producing country might appear simple, elsewhere in the importing nations, that system is governed by the law of supply and demand. We are in New York, across from the World Trade Center. Sandy McBrayer is in charge of public relations for the Coffee Exchange. We asked her how the exchange operates.
Basically, the Coffee, Sugar, and Cocoa Exchange provides an open, competitive marketplace where buyers and sellers meet to make transaction in coffee futures. What that means is there's a trading ring where buyers and sellers stand, shout back and forth at each other, and make agreements now to buy or sell coffee in the future.
How many people are there working around that?
On the Coffee Exchange itself, there's about 527 members, but each of those members have various people working for them, answering the phone, taking orders. So on the trading floor that you saw, there's probably about 2,000 or 2,500 people. On the Coffee, Sugar, and Cocoa Exchange, there are approximately 2,000 contracts traded per day, each contract being for 37,500 pounds of coffee. Normally per year, total transactions in coffee run about 550,000 contracts. And again, each contract is 37,500 pounds. So to figure out how many pounds of coffee are traded, you'd have to multiply those two figures.
That's 21 billion pounds of coffee a year. And when you consider that Latin America produces 6.5 billion pounds, it means that on the New York Exchange, each pound of coffee is bought and sold an average of 3 times. But while the coffee has found a buyer in New York, it doesn't necessarily follow that it is ready to travel. Every year in Colombia, 1,800,000,000 pounds of coffee are sorted by hand, grain by grain, and classified according to size and weight. Only the highest quality of coffee is exported, and what doesn't meet exportation standards is bought by Colombians at the corner grocery. They call it the Café Pasilla. After undergoing all of these transformations, the coffee is personalized, which is to say, it is numbered and is now finally ready to begin its journey. The coffee being exported continues its journey on the roads of Colombia. Though the rail system is quite extensive, the trains hardly run anymore. They are owned by the state, which has no interest in them, so private firms see to the transporting of goods in general, coffee in particular. The green coffee can be exported immediately. And since this is not a perishable product, it can be stored until market conditions are more favorable. Colombia cannot export more than 16 million bags per year. That quota is set in London by about 15 importing nations who have banded together to form an organization known as the International Coffee Agreement, the coffee counterpart to oil's OPEC. The National Federation not only has a network of warehouses, but is also involved in various other areas of activity represented in Bogota: banks and insurance companies, merchant marine, research and training centers, and industrial expertise. In short, along with 5 financial groups, the Federation shares the economic power in Colombia. The Federation is a Colombian administrative organization. Directly linked to the state, it wields tremendous political power. Unlike most of its neighbors, the Colombian government is not a military dictatorship. However, the powers that be rely on the army to maintain the country's social and economic systems. Most day laborers are itinerants. They move around the country according to the harvests. After the banana harvest, there is cotton picking, then the coffee harvest. At noon, Marlene and Tiberio head for the plantation's canteen. Here they are offered a meal for $1.50, which represents 50 pounds of cherries picked. No fruits or vegetables grow in this area, reserved for the cultivation of coffee.
Tranquilo.
At the canteen, the menu is limited and monotonous. Rice, manioc, beans, potatoes, green bananas, and, on occasion, a little meat.
Yo puedo escarrepel le puede haber.
Right now, for instance, I've got problems with my children because I lost their place at the daycare because of a few days of absence. But I always prefer to take them to the daycare because they eat much better there.
Allá, por ejemplo, comen 3 veces en el día y en la casa.
At the daycare, they eat 3 meals a day. At home, they only eat once, and it's mostly starches.
Allá, por ejemplo, pueden comer la carne y la leche, lo que en la casa no tienen.
Also at the daycare, they get meat and milk, something we can't give them at home.
Marta, buenos días. ¿Cómo le Marlene? ¿Cómo amanece? ¿Qué usted? ¿Qué le traigo a los niños? Ah, sí, ¿cómo no me llama Marlene? Mira, pues a ver, le doy el desayuno. ¿Cómo le ha ido? No pasa nada, pues así.
What are the workers' conditions? I noticed that here the situation is bad, but in the end, while the working conditions are bad, at least we work. If we didn't, things would be even worse. How long have you been picking coffee? Me, I've been working in the field since I was 10. How much did you earn this year? I still haven't earned anything because here we have to pay for everything. If you will, here the little we earn we have to spend on transportation and food, and in the end, there's nothing left. As for living conditions, there are no decent sanitary services. It smells bad. When there's water, we can wash ourselves. But when there's none, like now, here are the dormitories. When we come in at night, if the mattress isn't there, we've got to take our neighbors, so as not to sleep on the dirt floor. And what happens if you complain? We lose our job. They tell us, if you want to go, go. There's no shortage of manpower. So what can we do? What about a workers' organization? We need a union or a workers' movement, because when you get down to it, life here is hard.
It's just that here, the situation for women is very hard. For instance, before the birth of my second child, we had a lot of problems. We were picking, and my husband asked for more money for each pound of coffee picked. So they arrested him and put him in jail, and I had to give birth to my child and see to our needs all by myself.
Because he asked for an extra penny a pound for the coffee he picked, Tiberio was imprisoned for 4 months, along with 10 other demonstrators. While these practices might appear quite radical to liberals and Democrats, they are quite current here. Oscar Gutierrez speaks to us about the workers' organization.
Las grandes dificultades de organización de nuestros obreros agrícolas.
The main problems with organizing here come from the workers' living conditions.
En la cual viven nuestros trabajadores. De una parte, las grandes compañías multinacionales.
On the one hand, you've got the big multinationals and the big financial consortiums and their direct interference at the political, economic, and social levels in our country. This influence hampers our development, interferes with the evolution of our living conditions, and imposes solutions which are contrary to our needs.
Que no vienen de acuerdo con nuestras necesidades. De otra parte,
on the other hand, during most of its development, the Colombian workers' movement has been the victim of baneful influences.
Ha habido una influencia nefasta contra el mismo movimiento.
Without independence, sovereignty, and self-determination, it's impossible for our people, not only the people of Colombia, but the people of Latin America as a whole, to achieve their own development.
No solamente de Colombia, sino de América Latina en su conjunto.
Colombia's economy actually depends upon the tastes and needs of Western nations. For several years, coffee has been the agricultural product of this country, rendering its economy most vulnerable. It is unable to ensure its own long-term development. Cartagena is one of the 3 ports shipping Colombian coffee. Upon leaving the country, coffee is taxed more heavily than any other agricultural product in the world, more than 40%, a tax which has given rise to a complex smuggling system. For instance, more than 400,000 bags of coffee, having managed to escape this tax, find their way to Miami every year. When the coffee arrives in the importing nation, there is no time to store it. It immediately continues its journey incognito to Europe or North America. In Latin America, Africa, and Asia, in about 50 producing nations, the lives of 25 million people, as many as the entire population of Canada, depend on coffee. In Montreal, Mr. Gérald Vanout owns a coffee roasting and distribution firm. It is a family business which has grown and prospered mostly through the sale of coffee. We asked him where his product originated.
How we get the coffee? Well, to start with, you've got the exchange in New York. There's the coffee exchange, and we always work through brokers. We don't want to assume responsibility for merchandise which might be flawed, so we buy through a broker because we know that should we receive a bad lot, the broker would have to take it back.
We
get the coffee in vans from New York. Each van carries a maximum of 250 bags of coffee, and when we receive it, it is still green, in bags weighing about 132 pounds. So this is how we get it, still green, very clean, properly hulled. After that, we put it through highly specialized torrefaction machines, and from that we get, according to the degree of torrefaction, or roasting if you will, a golden brown coffee like this, or through longer roasting, we get dark coffee.
Nous avons le café noir.
You mustn't forget that the coffee which is green when we get it undergoes weight loss in the torrefaction process. If you want an American-style golden brown coffee, you lose 16%, though some only lose 12%. On the other hand, the dark coffee that you see here loses 22%. So all of this increases the price of the green coffee. You mustn't think that the green coffee we get for $1.48 or $2 that we sell it for $5 a pound. Calculating quickly when we buy the coffee green, figuring quickly in our head to get the retail price, that's 2 times. Well, it works out to 2.5 times the price of the green coffee.
While coffee gets its aroma from roasting, it also loses 10 to 25% of its weight in the process, and its price increases 250%.
The ones who make the real profit, it would seem, that is, when the coffee leaves the port in the producing country and heads for Europe or New York, it's the middlemen who make the money. The broker works on a commission basis. Just a few pennies a pound, that's all. But the main middleman, really, is the one who buys the coffee on the spot and resells it to the broker.
The pound of coffee that Mr. Vanut receives in Montreal is worth 67 times more than what the producer paid to Marlene back in Chinchina. Is Mr. Vanut aware of the working conditions of Colombian coffee pickers?
Unfortunately, no. I don't have much to say about that, being that I haven't been there and that I haven't seen any literature on these conditions. But I would imagine that these people would be somewhat exploited. Given their numbers and the fact that they must absolutely earn a living, they are forced to take whatever work is available. It goes without saying that these poor agricultural workers can't go out on a strike since, in my opinion, they would be the first to be punished. Because they earn so little, they can't. It's impossible for them to go out on strike.
Have you ever went in a coffee producer country?
No, I have never visited a coffee producing country. However, I have seen pictures of coffee plantations, coffee trees, the process of washing the beans, those types of things. Only in photographs, though. I've never been to one.
Okay, so do you have an idea of the conditions, the workers' conditions?
Only from pictures. From what I can tell, it's basically poorer conditions than what we're used to here in the United States. I don't believe the labor is paid as high as normal wages are here. In fact, I think it's very cheap labor.
While rain is good for the coffee shrub, not so for the workers who are ill-shod and improperly protected from the equatorial downpours. Adults often suffer from rheumatism, and they rely on their children to bend down to pick the cherries from the lower branches.
El 75% de las enfermedades que yo tengo son del trabajo del cafetal, que son las enfermedades que me dejan.
75% of the illnesses we have come from our work in the coffee plantations.
Muchas enfermedades así.
For example, malaria,
que las deja las mojadas calorosas que uno se pega por ahí en los taos.
the headaches from the torrential rains. In fact, the work brings more illness than money.
¡Vámonos! ¡Vámonos, vámonos!
During the picking season, large numbers of children leave school. Though only 7 or 8 years old, they already contribute to the national economy.
¡Vámonos! ¡Vámonos, vámonos! ¡Ya no hay quien hay ahora!
After a dozen hours amidst the branches of the coffee shrubs, the laborers take their day's harvest to be weighed.
Gracias.
Pelando café y cosas.
On the plantations, the quality of the scales is not as well controlled as the quality of coffee, and workers are often shortchanged here.
Rodrigo, no se premio, que es muy alto. No, es muy alto.
They will not be paid this evening, only in a week. They will earn a maximum of $42 for 6 days of work, which amounts to a maximum of 60 cents an hour.
Obviously, if you had to pay the coffee pickers on the spot a minimum wage of, let's say, $2 an hour, the price of coffee would be prohibitive. The prices would be much too high.
Is it absolutely necessary for people like Marlene and Tiberio to work for such a pittance in order for us to enjoy our daily coffee? Would it not be preferable to establish a more equitable system of exchange between the producing nations and coffee-consuming countries? Saturday afternoon, the day laborers return to collect their wages. They are paid in cash, with none of the deductions that might entitle them to social benefits, no health or unemployment insurance, no pension plan.
1660.
Colombian sells for $4.70 a pound. We get very little of this coffee, and we don't blend it, because it has, from its texture, it has a taste which suits everyone. It's neither too strong nor too mild. It doesn't need to be blended with another coffee to improve it, as it were.
Besides, coffee is a staple. Today, you can't go without it. It's a stimulant. It's good to have a fine cup of coffee.
The coffee's journey ends in a cup, a glass, or a bowl, in settings as varied as they are unpredictable. On one Saturday afternoon, in an Italian district of Montreal, sports fans meet at their local coffee hut. As with any consumer product, coffee also feeds an entire advertising network. It is glorified in the most unexpected places. The only important thing is that it is bought and consumed.
You have here the famous 2-liter container of frozen liquid coffee, which gives you 360 cups of coffee at a cost of 7 cents a cup. This way, you eliminate the bags as such, as well as the filters and the personnel required for the preparation of the coffee. Hey, buddy, sorry to bother you, but you wouldn't happen to have a quarter for the coffee, would you?
I just got it in a few months ago. Smells good, doesn't it? Yes. Would you like to try it? Yes, I think I would. Try it. Go have a coffee and come back.
Coffee is my favorite ice cream. Today, there's a special on coffee ice cream. 3 scoops for $1.
Coffee byproducts are varied. There's something for everyone, in every price range. Today, on New York 7th Avenue, there's a bargain. 3 scoops of coffee ice cream for only $1.
Coffee ice cream, my favorite.
When did the coffee become the national drink?
I think it was approximately 200 years ago, shortly after the Boston Tea Party, when it suddenly became unpatriotic to be drinking tea, and everyone started drinking coffee. Okay. Do you like coffee? Yes, very much. And how do you like it? I drink it black.
As for me personally, my taste runs for black coffee, but filtered.
I happen to like the mocha black because I prefer a more robust coffee. I find that the mocha black gives me that.
Coffee, for me, means the survival of
For
La
Helen
Mama.
Stewart, one of the originators of Café Théâtre, coffee means the survival of La Mama.
La Mama today. It is a very strange story, but coffee is the way by which we existed and could exist to become whatever we are. If we are anything, it all comes from coffee.
Coffee is also the opportunity and even the privilege of all who can afford it to share in pleasant encounters.
Cafe Theater in New York City started in 1958 with Joe Chino. Joe Chino had a little theater on Cornelia Street, and this indeed is where Coffee Theater started. 1961, La Mama, which we were on the opposite side of town, we started a coffee theater. And it is from these two coffee theaters that all of the other coffee theater off of Broadway and whatever else has came from these two places.
Café Théâtre, literary cafes, with time, coffee has become the rallying point for all types of creative people.
In front of the Comédie Française is the Regency Café. In it is a room, set apart, with an easy chair and a table. When I enter, the unmoving dust has already risen. Between my rubber lips, the cinder of a cigarette smokes. And in the smoke, one sees two intense smokes. The thorax of the café, and in the thorax, a profound oxide of sadness.
While for those who have the time to savor it, coffee is good until the last drop. For millions of coffee workers, it has a bitter taste.
I don't understand why we who work so hard don't enjoy the same living conditions as in other countries. For example, have free health services. Here, you've got to pay for everything. We who work so hard don't have the same rights. Sometimes I think about moving, changing my life to see if things would be better elsewhere. But I know that the poor will always be poor.
Y los pobres donde llegamos nunca dejamos de ser pobres.
Como besos que llegan al alba en una noche llena de lucero, de materna mi tierra sabana. ¡Uepa! Este es el grito alegre de un vaquero que con su negra baila y llega con su mochila llena de luceros. A mi pueblo cantaba, ay cuando cantaban aquellos porros habaneros que mi pueblo cantaba. Esa manera que mi pueblo canta, por esa manera que mi pueblo canta. Oye Colombia, este es tu porro y esta es tu música. ¡Ven, ven!
Una publicación del movimiento obrero. Compre y lea Tribuna Roja, periódico del gobierno.
Cristal de Caldas.
Contra el gobierno y la oligarquía, compre y lea Tribuna Roja, periódico del gobierno. Solamente vale 5 pesos.
No sé lo que yo tengo cuando llego a la parranda y me entusiasman el tonar de unos tambores, el tonar de un clarinete y la trompeta de la banda. y escucho un porro de esos habaneros, un porro de esos que llegan al alma, en una noche llena de lucero, de más tierna mi tierra sabana. ¡Uepa! Este es el grito alegre de un barquero, que con su negra baila y llega, con su mochila llena de luceros, a romper lo cantaba. Ay, cuando
Yo quiero para mis hijos lo mejor
I
del
want the
mundo,
best for
pero
my
como sé
children,
que no puedo
but I know I
darles lo
can't
mejor,
give it
pues,
to them.
pero nunca
I wouldn't
he
want
querido
them
que
to
mis
have
hijos
the
tuvieran
same
que
life
pasar
I've
las
had,
situaciones que paso yo,
picking
pero
coffee in the
comprendo la
rain on the
cosecha. Yo
plantations.
quisiera que
I'd like them to
tuvieran un
have
trabajo
steady
estable,
work,
y
not
que no
necessarily
ganaran mucho,
earn a
pero
lot
que
of
fuera
money,
estable, que
but
no tuviera
steady.
tampoco un capital
Not
muy
like
grande.
me,
Así
work
como me toca
hard
a mí,
and not even
que
earn enough to
trabajo mucho,
eat.
pero no gano siquiera para la comida.
¡Qué rico! ¡Goza mi porro! ¡Oye, Colombia!
How old are you?
I'm 22.
Yo tengo 22 años.